Welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Erik, Voss, and Loki Season 2, Episode 3 has potentially just revealed the true villain of this show, and it's... Where is she? Oh, there she is. Always sneaks up on us. And while maybe this has been brewing for quite some time on the surface, it isn't until now that Miss Minutes has revealed her true intentions and threatened to spill the tea on all of He Remains' dark secrets. But as one of those secrets, did they fuck? This is the sneak peek on New Rockstars, where we take the temperature of whatever we're watching while we head into the next episode or look ahead in the next week of fandom and nerddom. Joining me on this episode, formerly a clock and now turned a real human being, Maude Garrett. Hi, Maude.
Hey, y'all. Hi there. Lovely to be here on the show.
By the way, if you want to hear us talk about that big secret Miss Minutes teased at the end of the episode, head on over to the Break Room channel, because we talked about that on Inside Marvel, and we had a lot of hot takes on what that secret could be.
We sure did. Now, Ms. Minutes back on track. Let's tick the talk. She's finally broken a little bit bad here. Running out of allies, she tries to persuade Ravonna with some secret that we, the audience, don't yet know about. But what is her end game here? I'm wondering if this was another Agatha all along moment, that it's the witching and bitching and ticking ladies who are running shop around here.
Yes.
Now, is she only just after the body and or love and endless affections of a Kang, or is there something deeper going on here? Why is Miss Minutes gone full villain all of a sudden, or was she always the villain from the start?
I think she was always the villain from the start. I just think, we got so swept up with the reveal of He Who Remains in the final episode of Loki Season 1. The elevator doors opened. He took over the show, rightfully. But I think we forgot the craziest thing that happened in that Season 1 finale was that jump scare. It retroactively recharacterized every moment we saw of Miss Minutes and how creepy she was.
Yes.
And in Season 2, they've just escalated that. Kind of like the monster in a well-structured horror film. They leave the entity in the shadows, and then Miss Minutes is just kind of talked about for the first couple of episodes. Then episode 3, right away, she says, "Bless your heart."
We all know what that means. Yeah. I like that she's been quite unassuming this entire time, but I think also now is the best time ever to talk about the fact that AI is taken over, isn't it? And AI is the real threat. We are years away from Skynet being a reality. So the fact that Miss Minutes is starting to kind of get the clock cogs spinning, it makes a lot of sense. And I actually really like the dichotomy between these two villains, maybe. It's like two sides of the same clock, where you've got Kang, who we've seen as erratic. We've seen him as, and even timely. He's also quite unstable, but then you've got this very, very certain, she's by the minutes here. She's very in control. She's very calm. And I really think that there's something going on with, that balance between those two. And I think that, just because Kang's supposed to be the conqueror doesn't mean that AI, who knows everything, isn't actually behind this as well.
Oh, absolutely. This is, I love everything about this season. I'm just going to say that from the get-go.
It's so good. It's so good. I know we got a little bit of heat because we found the start of episode 2 a little confusing because it just threw us straight back into it. But that's not to say that these episodes haven't been bringing it.
They have been bringing it. It's been the best. Loki as a whole, Season 1 and now Season 2. Now, we'll see if they stick the landing, but so far, it has been the best thing Marvel has produced since Avengers Endgame, without a doubt.
I was a big fan of WandaVision as well. They're both very different, but I love that we are looking at sort of it's weird here because Loki, we kind of keep forgetting that he is a god and he's sometimes a secondary character in some of these moments because we are talking like it's bigger than him. Whereas WandaVision, I really liked the look of grief and it was a lot more personalized sort of look at these characters. But I do go back and forth on WandaVision. They are both great. It's just WandaVision didn't stick the landing quite as much as we wanted. And even Jack Schaefer has said they kept giving us they said, we'll figure out the ending later. And you can kind of see that. But overall, you're right. WandaVision is up there. Well, they're getting showrunners now. So I think we're going to have a lot more structure instead of effort, we'll do it live kind of mentality. So,
but whatever they've been doing, and I think it just happened to work out in the case for Loki. With Season 1, you had Mike Waldron and Kate Herron just understood what the vision of this show was. And then Kevin Wright was just kind of their champion from the executive side. And so Kevin Wright, I think, fully gets the show. And then you have Benson and Moorhead this season that are just carrying that vision forward. I think my only worry was the direction, because they're doing different directors for many of the episodes. But and most of the time I'm like, make sure you hire DGA directors to direct, because it's hard to do. They have Dan Deliu did episode 2, and then Kazra Farhani did episode 3. Kazra Farhani did all the production design of season 1 of Loki and now season 2. And it's just so talented and such a visionary. But getting to the question of like Miss Minutes, Renslayer, He Who Remains, the love triangle between these three is so interesting to me.
Who had that on their bingo card? Not me.
Right? Not me at all. Like, you know, it just seemed like I didn't think the show would go there. Like, you'd think like, oh, there's like this AI sentient thing that was an invention of this weird, creepy creator, this kind of Pygmalion-esque story, but you don't think they're gonna go there. But she gets so horny in this episode, and it's like, I was questioning, why would you want a physical body if you can appear anywhere and any time?
True.
I just think she misses it. The only way you would want a physical body is if at one point in your existence you had one and you miss it. So I think he might have extracted her.
I could disagree with that argument. If you are constantly seeing, I mean, grass is always greener. You covet what you don't have. And so I don't know if she's necessarily ever had it. And I think that that's why she's feeling inferior, because it's like, yes, she's been trusted. Yes, she knows everything. She could have easily had her data wiped at any time, but it sounds like there's, you know, a lot of trust there because she's only AI. And I think that maybe it's an empty promise. One day my prince will come. One day I'll get my body. But I think by limiting her in that capacity this entire time, it almost puts her in her place where she's not as much of a threat. So should she get her own body, that's the point of no return. That's when she becomes completely unstoppable, because would she then be able to change her appearance at any given time? You know, and that's just a whole other superpower that will render her even more powerful, I think.
I think we could compare her to Ultron in the MCU, because Ultron, I think, found a lot of power in being detached from any one body, but he did have one vibranium shell that he made that was kind of like the Ultron Prime in that final battle. But I think he still recognized that like his power was how he was kind of like portable. And I wonder if like, would AI would Skynet and its infinite wisdom view the human biological need to procreate and to bang as a limitation? Like, would they just be like, oh, because if you think about it, like the human's instinctive need to want to have sex is kind of like, you could argue from an AI perspective, a limitation on our technological possibilities.
Yeah, if you remove that from the equation, you know, you'd have a very fast path towards unlimited power, which is obviously their goal.
But the question would be, what are you doing it for? I guess if we're going to talk about like the ethics and morality and worthwhileness of procreation, I don't want to get into that here.
I want to go back to the Ultron comparison, because what I think is interesting with Ms. Minutes' weakness is that I believe if it's AI and she doesn't have a body, she can be switched off. It's through the temp pad, and it's through however she can project herself. But if she is only AI and without a body, you can destroy it still, whether it's a virus. I don't know if we're in a universe where viruses exist because it's the TVA and time doesn't even exist. But, you know, there's an option where you can which is, again, why she's not been given a body. But a big thing that I noticed about Ms. Minutes that we have not seen before, I mean, yes, she's thirsty. She wants to tick his tock, but also she's vulnerable. She is having a moment where she's showing vulnerability because she's not in complete control. I think that she thought she had something with Kang that was unbreakable, unbendable, and she's seeing the cracks in the plan here. So she's now bringing in someone else who she was in competition with, but now is seeing as an ally to bring her in so that she's got another way to see out her plan. And I think that that's really interesting because Kang was always at the top, and then Ravonna and Ms. Minutes were tangentially sort of like the side companions. And so if they team up, he's rendered redundant. He's rendered useless. So I think we could have a full dynamic change here.
That's why I think we are seeing like a Taylor Swift, Sophie Turner team up here. And I think it's wonderful.
I love that you know that.
I think it's delightful that they're comparing notes. And but to the question of, did they I do not think on Disney Plus, on Bob Iger's Disney Plus, will they allow the idea that he remains made a living that he could do that too. But I do think that her programming may have either been based on or even extracted from someone that he did sleep with.
Oh, interesting. And
that's
so that's
where
residue.
My mind is at right now.
Got it.
Residue.
So that's a remaining thing. We look at these character traits, like who are these people at a fundamental level? Kang, and I believe every iteration of him will not team up, will always remain lone wolf, is always the apex. He is at the top of the chain. And so any single time someone wants a partnership, that's like the word that cannot be uttered, and it's what makes everything crumble. And I think for Ms. Minutes, it's wanting to be needed. So those two, that is not a compatible, you can't ever be a partnership when one wants companionship and the other one doesn't. So and I think that every iteration of Kang, we're going to come to that same conclusion.
That's kind of their fatal flaw, or their whatever in Greek tragedies, there's always just the
Achilles
one thing
heel
that brings you down. And I think it's that. I think it's inability to work in a partnership or share the credit,
Mind you, Ravonna's been a little bit like that. She's been lying. She's deceitful. She's been at the top of the chain there, and she's made sure that everyone under her works for her as well. So there's a bit of a sort of like a Kang similarity of being on the top of the food chain and not necessarily being completely trustful or trusting at the same time.
That's a good point. What Kang seems to have with Miss Minutes and with Renslayer seems to have with Mobius a little bit, you could say.
You're passing it down the chain of command.
Yeah, like they'd kind of have their own little dirty breakup.
They have a little bit of whiskey at the end of a day, even though, do they have a start and end of a work day? This is what keeps me up at night. Do they go to the bathroom? Where do they sleep? Eric? Where's the breakdown on their bed? I think they're just working 24/7.
Is there a gym? Are there any amenities? Do they have tandem parking spots?
They
or
get
is it
pie.
street parking? Yeah,
That's all you get. I love the theories going around that the pie is what's wiping brains and minds as well.
There's in August we had a whole thing. I speculated last summer that it was Soylent Green. That they recycle employees' deceased remains and turn it into the food.
It's just variant plus my favorite.
Excuse me, there's an eyeball in my key lime pie. I didn't say remove it. I just want to let you know. Compliments to the show. Now, longtime New Rockstars viewers know how much we use Geologie and how long we've been using it for. But if this is your first time hearing about Geologie, get ready for blockbuster quality skincare on a student film budget. Geologie is a 23-time award-winning skin, hair, and body care company recognized in Men's Health, Oprah Daily, Hypebeast, Birdie, Esquire, and GQ. Geologie's products are just a handful of powerful, proven ingredients that have been trusted by dermatologists for decades. Geologie can help you fight acne, reduce oiliness, prevent wrinkles, combat dark or puffy under eyes, have smoother, hydrated skin, and target signs of aging. Everything you need to keep your skin healthy, no matter how much you soak in the pool this summer. Don't know where to start? Geologie can create a simple and effective skincare or hair care routine for you. All you gotta do is take a quick 30-second quiz. Right now, if you use the code NewRockstars100, Geologie will give you 100% off their award-winning skincare trial set. You'll also get an additional bonus offer of up to 30% off one skin, hair, or body products when you add it to your trial. It's truly a wild offer, one of the best they've ever given our audience. So click the link in the description or go to geolog.ie/rockstars100 to get started. Before we continue with our discussion, we got a big week coming up on New Rockstars and the Break Room and the Deep Dive. So we're going to continue talking about Loki. Obviously, our Loki episode 4 breakdown will be on the New Rockstars channel Thursday night. But before that, you're going to see Tommy and Maude and me reacting to the episode and what happens in episode 4. Also, we got a special October treat, a breakdown of the 1996 Wes Craven Scream. I am so excited for you guys to see this. It's one of my favorite videos we've done in a long time. It goes into why Scream, despite it being like knowingly derivative of horror movies that came out in the previous decade, is really one of the most important horror films in our lifetimes. Ooh. Yes, it's like a bit of a 90s kid nostalgia thing, but it is so important. Not only did it launch a franchise, it like codified what whodunits could be in the modern age. It's just so good. And then we're going to continue with our coverage of Gen V in Rick and Morty. And then on the deep dive, either this week or early next week, you will see our analysis of John Carpenter's The Thing, 1982. Another amazing whodunit story.
No.
Oh, body horror.
Yeah.
Rob Bottin's prop work and how Stan Winston came in to help out. And it's, again, I think the greatest whodunit in cinema history, to where people are still looking at clues and finding new things in it.
I have confessions. I don't watch horror movies.
You're missing out, Maude.
Am I though, or am I sleeping really well at night?
Maybe. I'll say this. Some horror movies are like, I think Ari Aster's horror movies are really just designed to make you uncomfortable. And some horror movies don't do that. I think some horror movies just like give you a fascinating outlook on human nature and excite you. But I agree. Some horror movies are kind of tough.
I'm the kind of person I love reading about horror movies, not watching them. So I would rather see your breakdown and deep dive on Scream and The Thing than actually watch those movies. So thank you for making people like me the kind of content that I can consume.
We got you covered, Maude.
Thank you.
Also, be sure to check out nerdriot.shop, where you can always grab the latest and greatest new Rockstars gear. I'm wearing one of my favorite shirts they've ever released. This is like a Mobius.
Key lime pie.
Speaking of the eyeball pie, this shirt's awesome. But we also have a new shirt that's going to be OB themed. You guys are going to love this shirt, so keep an eye out for that.
We stand OB here. Now, you got this bit in your video yesterday. Let's talk about the differences between Victor Timely's for a moment. There's different ones. He's obviously very, very different to Kang as well. But at the beginning of the episode, we are introduced to a Victor from the sacred timeline. He's the one that Ravonna gives the book to when he's a child. Slip it through the window. But then the rest of the episode, we're with an adult branch timeline Timely. So this isn't sacred timeline, Victor. This is a branch. So this is like a very different version. Can we just break this down a little bit? So is the Timely from the sacred timeline the one who becomes he who remains?
Yes. Or at least a new cycle of he who remains. At least I think that's what this episode is saying.
Okay.
I had to rewatch this episode a few times too, Maude. We have a video yesterday that you could check out where I think I have a pretty good explanation. But the idea is that if you rewatch the season 1 finale, He Who Remains story says that eons ago in the 31st century, a variant of me. So one of my variants. I don't think he was saying he was from the 31st century. You know, at the time we thought that like all Kangs originated as Nathaniel Richards in the 31st century. And he just kind of credited another variant to be like milliseconds before the rest to discover multiversal technology.
Okay.
I think the idea is that most Kangs originated as a guy named Nathaniel Richards, a descendant of Reed Richards who lives in the 31st century. They discover multiversal travel at the same time. Think of like Rick versus Rick Prime in the Rick and Morty show. They all kind of discovered it at the same time, and then they share resources, but then they go to war. But He Who Remains says that he was kind of like the top of that dog pile because he was able to tame Eliath and then prune all the other timelines. I think the idea is that the Kang that becomes He Who Remains was named Victor Timely and existed on the sacred timeline in the 1860s. What's confusing, though, is he just so happens to look exactly like Jonathan Majors. I think the only way this makes sense, at least in my head, is that one of the warring Kangs in the 31st century, as part of their plan, kidnapped baby version of Kangs from like the 30th century or whatever, something like that, and hid them in the sacred timeline, or hid at least one of them in the sacred timeline as a kind of fail-safe contingency plan, a sleeper cell that they could activate by giving them the right book at the right time. That, I mean, I think either way, the idea was he's trying to complete the loop by finding his origin point in 1860s Chicago, give his younger self the book, and then complete the cycle so that young man will go on to invent the TVA.
Right. That actually is more of an Ouroboros thing as well, though, because if he's, it's like, where does it ever begin? Because his 31st century is bringing him back to the 19th century. Oh, okay, that's, okay.
It is confusing, and I could be totally wrong. It just based on this episode, that's the only way that makes sense if they say that this young man who's going to grow up to look exactly like Victor, exactly like Jonathan Majors, is on the sacred timeline. It'd be one thing if he was in a branch, but the fact that he's in the sacred timeline, that just says that he was there in the MCU history we've been watching since the beginning. And so for him to grow up to look like Jonathan Majors, he must have a DNA connection to that 31st century war that He Remains talked about.
Okay, I was going to say, because we saw a branch Victor Timely, who does look like Jonathan Majors as well, but that's a branch version. But he also had that same kind of like temporal loom.
Yeah, I think what made it a branch is that he was given the book. I think the book made it split off, and that became a Nexus event that created a branch. Okay. But the reason why it doesn't get pruned is that basically He Remains says so. Like, He Remains is in control of all of it. So he can say what is defined as sacred timeline and what is branch timeline, and which branches just kind of get erased from the archives and allowed to exist.
Okay. Now, earlier I was saying that my theory is that all Kangs will be adverse to partnership. He's going to be on the throne the whole time. He's in command. He's the conqueror. But in episode 1, we hear He Who Remains tell Ravonna, I will be proud to lead with you. Lead with you. Thank you for being on my team. In this episode, Timely casts her away at the mere mention of a partnership. So that is an absolute 180. Why is that happening? Is it because this is the branch version of him and his eye's been on the prize? And we're going to meet a later Kang who then recognizes partnership is important. What? Help me come to terms with what that's about.
Yeah, I think that really is the question of this show. Like, why can't he have a partnership? I think the idea was, like, the audio recording that we heard in episode 1 of this season was like covered up. I don't think like people were supposed to hear it. I think he makes that promise to her, but I think this is evidence, like this is the secret that I think Miss Minutes is going to tell Renslayer, is that he made promises to Renslayer, but it was all bullshit. I think he used her to win the war, and then right when it came time to share the right to rule the TVA, he backed out. And he said, oh, I can't trust you. And then, because I think that's just kind of his fatal flaw. He's afraid of being stabbed in the back. Isn't
it interesting that Loki was always the master manipulator, but now we've got Kang, who's like taken front seat for being a manipulator like that. We don't like liars. We don't like people who back out of their promises. Not cool.
Not cool. You know, what's interesting is the fact that Loki was, I don't know if Marvel planned this or it was just kind of a happy accident that they decided to do this in Avengers Endgame. But the fact that Loki was branched from the events, like right after being defeated by the Avengers in the 2012 battle, that was the moment this Loki, that was his like origin point. Like, I think that's telling. If you were to prune Loki from a different point in his history, like during the events of the 2011 Thor movie when he was trying to conquer Asgard, or like when he was like being choked by Thanos or something like that, you probably would have had a completely different story in this Loki series.
I think that Loki has learnt about partnership and teamwork and something bigger than himself, because his eye was always on the prize. He was always selfish in his endeavor, but he had a very clear goal, which I actually admire, and that was to rule Midgard. Like, this guy just wanted power over Earth. But when you go into a place like the TVA and there's a drawer with Infinity Stones in it that are just trinkets, his goals, what was important to him, has been so minimized, because now he's discovered that there's so much that is just bigger than him. And I think that was a very humbling moment for him all through season 1. And now it's like, you know, he has these moments with Sylvie where it's like, hey, stop making this about us. Like, he's almost talking to a past version of himself that was selfish. And he's like, this is bigger than us. Like, I kind of like the evolution that we've had of Loki. But you're right. Like, that pinnacle moment there was room to change because he'd failed again. But that's what Lokis do.
We're kind of doing a heat check right now. So let's just go into our heat check segment. This is when we give our thoughts on how the season is going. Are we feeling positive? Are we worried for upcoming episodes? I will say this episode kind of felt like a second pilot, or at least the second first episode, in the way that it introduced some new characters and new concepts. How are you feeling, Maude, as we go into episode 4?
Confident. I like that, you know, we are in the same vein of season 1, where it's like you can pick a part on the timeline and you can go in there and you've got a whole new scope of surroundings. We've been in the future, we've been in the past, we've been on different planets before. So it's really cool to see this point in time that they're exploring. But now, because we've had a whole season to establish the TVA and they were supposed to bring it down, we're learning more about who Ravonna really is. We're learning more about Mobius. Like, why is he so against learning who his past life was. Why is he blindly following TVA now? I love this show, and I think that it's just going to get better and better. And hopefully, are we getting a season 3?
We better. I think Marvel just needs to continue building out this mythology. It's the best once you have something this good. I do not need 6 seasons of it. No. But if you want to do like a 3rd season that's 8 episodes
to round it out,
I wouldn't say no to that. And then take a couple years to work on it. Like I don't need it next year, but like 2025.
Do you reckon they can keep Owen Wilson and Tom Hiddleston for that long?
That'd be tough. But if Tom Hiddleston, Owen Wilson, they're big names. They're only going to get bigger names as a result of shows like this. But it seems like they have a lot of fun on this.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be harder to keep people like Ke Huy Quan, honestly, because his star power is just blowing up.
True. All right. No, I'm feeling good. Heat check. Hot.
Yeah, this might be other than this between episode 1 and episode 2 or between no episodes and episode 1, I think this might be the most excited. This episode 3 is just, I don't know. It feels like the fact that, my wife's family comes from the south side of Chicago. Oh. I weirdly know a lot about Chicago history. I love this point in history with the current wars between Tesla and Edison. And this is like the turn of the century. The Chicago World's Fair is a setting, the backdrop of H.H. Holmes' monstrous killings in his murder castle. So much of this episode was just like, I'm eating good right now, this is.
Meanwhile, as an Aussie who really had very little interest in how electricity came about, I knew diddly dick squat about this episode. So I've learned more from hearing you explain it than I did watching the episode.
It's just like, hey, I want to hold on to this feeling for the dark times. Because, we're going to have some dark times ahead. Who knows how the Marvels is going to go? Who knows what's going to happen if Deadpool has to get delayed?
Don't you dare. You take that back, son.
I know, I'm knocking on all the wood that it won't. But God, I'm just going to remember this feeling. I remember talking about this episode with you, Maude, and ride this high for as long as I can.
You're doing good, Loki. Keep it up.
Keep it up. And that's where we'll leave it for this episode of The Sneak Peek. Follow New Rockstars on Twitter. Please follow Maude on all social media at Maude Garrett. You can follow me at EA Voss. And we'll see you next week. Thanks for watching, y'all.
Bye.